All right, let's get right into it. Welcome back to The Explainer. So, if you've been watching the AI space at all lately, you already know that AI agents are completely transforming how software engineering gets done. But let's be honest, if your primary language is PHP, you've probably felt a bit left out in the cold on this one. Well, today we are looking at a massive shift. We're exploring a brand new package called hao-code, which is finally bringing those advanced Claude Code-style agentic capabilities directly to PHP and Laravel. Okay, let's dive into this.
It's a super provocative question, right? And it hits on a very real pain point for thousands of developers. Look, PHP has an absolutely massive production footprint. We're talking sprawling Laravel monoliths, deeply rooted legacy enterprise applications, and just countless WordPress sites running the web. And yet, there are almost zero first-class AI tools designed to manage them natively. You're sitting there desperately wanting an AI agent that can read your files, coordinate subagents, run terminal commands, but the native SDKs just haven't been there for your stack.
Here is our roadmap for the explainer. We'll start with the PHP AI agent gap, then define the Claude Code standard, introduce hao-code itself, look under the hood inside the agentic loop, cover some practical PHP use cases, and wrap up by evaluating the alternatives. Starting off with Section 1, the PHP AI agent gap. Let's look at this ecosystem divide.
There's just a stark, undeniable contrast in the developer ecosystem right now. On one side of the fence, you have Python and TypeScript. They're basically the gold standard mainland right now, completely flushed with these rich, pre-built AI agent SDKs, like the official Anthropic libraries, that do all the heavy lifting for you. But if you're coding in PHP, it's like you're stranded on an isolated island. Historically, you've been stuck building these really thin, fragile HTTP wrappers around APIs. That means you have to manually construct the agentic loops, parse the JSON yourself, and write the logic to actually handle tool execution. It's incredibly tedious work. So let's jump to Section 2, the Claude Code standard. This is the baseline we are trying to achieve in PHP. To really understand what we're aiming for here, we need to clearly define Anthropic's Claude Code standard. Claude Code is an AI-powered coding assistant that lives right there in your terminal. It works directly inside your codebase to build, debug, and actually ship changes. Instead of you having to manually copy-paste context files, it uses agentic search to just figure out your project structure on its own. It's an absolute game changer because it maintains context locally and executes commands exactly where your code lives. So the crucial point is what actually makes this standard tick under the hood. If you dig into the Anthropic API documentation, true agentic behavior requires some very specific technical tools. We're talking about bash code execution to run terminal commands, text editor code execution so it can view and modify files, and web fetch capabilities to grab outside context. Now combine all those tools with session persistence, which is sometimes called daemon mode, where the agent actually remembers the context across multiple back and forth terms, and boom, you have a real autonomous loop. This exact shape of power is what we've been wanting to bring over to PHP. Which brings us to Section 3, introducing hao-code, the long-awaited bridge solution. The source article puts this perfectly, stating, quote, hao-code fills that gap. It's a composer package that ships a complete agentic loop, end quote. I mean, this is literally the missing link. It gives you a multi-turn agent with full tool execution, streaming, session persistence, and abort control right out of the box for PHP. It even installs as a global CLI, giving you an interactive REPL so you get that highly sought-after authentic Claude Code terminal experience without ever having to leave your native PHP ecosystem. And it's incredibly flexible. hao-code exposes a really clean static facade with 5 primary interaction modes for your application. You've got query for those simple, single-shot requests that just return text in the token cost. There's stream, which yields real-time messages to your UI as they generate. Conversation handles the full back-and-forth multi-turn lifecycle. Then there's resume, which is amazing. You can magically restore a totally previous session just by passing in its ID. And finally, structured, which lets you enforce strict JSON schemas on the AI's output. Basically, it covers every conceivable way you'd want to talk to an AI model.
All right, Section 4. Let's pop the hood and go inside the agentic loop for a technical deep dive.
Right out of the box, hao-code ships with over 30 built-in tools organized into these functional groups. The shell and files group gives the agent the power to run actual bash commands and natively read, edit, or write files. The agents and planning group is super fascinating. It allows for sub-agent coordination with tools like send message and total write. And then you have the teams group, which lets the primary agent spin up multiple sub-agents to tackle different subtasks in parallel. It's essentially giving your PHP code hands, feet, and an entire squad of assistants.
But honestly, the real magic happens when you start building custom tools. Just imagine your AI agent is reasoning through a user prompt and it suddenly realizes, hey, I need to check an order status in the database. With hao-code, making that happen is just 4 simple steps. You extend the SDK tool class, define a name and description so the AI knows what it does, outline the parameters for the input, and then just implement the handle method with your custom PHP logic. Inside that handle method, the agent literally pauses its reasoning, fetches a database record via your Laravel Eloquent model, returns it to the agent, and seamlessly continues its logic. Your Eloquent models become directly callable mid-thought process.
Moving to Section 5, Practical PHP Use Cases. How do we translate this into real-world value?
How do you actually use this today to save time? First off, you can build embedded Laravel agents that hit your Eloquent models directly inside a standard HTTP request or artisan command. Second, you can do session-persistent CLI work. Say you're about to do a risky refactor. You just use the fork session flag. If your terminal accidentally closes, no big deal, you just resume the session by ID. Third, and this is an absolute lifesaver for CI pipelines, it has cost-bounded automation. By setting a max budget in USD, the agent will gracefully abort rather than running up some massive unbounded cloud bill. And lastly, multi-provider gateway routing lets you point hao-code at literally any Anthropic-Compatible API endpoint just by tweaking a URL in your config file. Finally, Section 6, Evaluating the Alternatives. Let's weigh our options here.
The difference here is night and day. On one hand, you have hao-code, which hands you a pre-built Anthropic agentic loop on a silver platter. It inherently understands Anthropic's specific tool shape and their extended thinking capabilities. On the other hand, if you try hacking together standard OpenAI PHP SDKs or writing basic Guzzle HTTP requests, you're going to hit a brick wall. They simply don't support the native Anthropic tool shapes out of the box, meaning you are stuck manually building, parsing, and maintaining the entire loop yourself. Because there is no official Laravel package from Anthropic right now, hao-code is stepping perfectly into that massive void.
Now, a quick reality check for those of you ready to jump into the terminal and install it. As of the source materials publication, hao-code sits at 112 GitHub stars, so we're definitely talking about early-stage software here. The documentation is really thorough, but if you're planning to implement this in a production environment, you absolutely need to follow best practices and strictly pin your versions in your Composer JSON file. The API and session formats might shift around a bit before it hits a stable 1.0 release, so just avoid those carrot constraints for now, all right? Which brings us to our final thought for today. With these tools finally successfully bridging the gap between advanced agentic workflows and legacy PHP codebases, we really have to ask, is your PHP monolith ready for its first AI agent? The capability is finally here, right at your fingertips, and it might just be time to start upgrading those legacy ops with some real autonomous intelligence. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.